Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you guys may be listening. Welcome to the first episode of Our Own Volition, the official podcast of Volition Comics. I'm Peyton Drozd Williams. I'm going to be your host. I look forward to spending half an hour, however long it may be, with you every week as we dive into the history of our company, into the ins and outs of everyday things we got going on, behind the scenes snippets, updates on what we got cooking, my background, everyone else's background. Obviously, this is the first episode, like I mentioned, so we're still kind of working at the kinks as far as the sound, as far as the format, so bear with me. Also, I've never done a podcast. I mean, I do have my own YouTube. It's not a podcast in that sense. It's honestly just me ranting. That's another matter for another time. So I guess in that sense, it's not really my first time experiencing something like this, but at least in this particular format, this streamlined format, yeah, that's a first. For me, it's a first for, I think, all of us. Obviously, this first episode is just going to be just me, so bear with me. But we are going to have guests on here pretty soon. I look forward to having Aiden on. I'm a co-owner of Volition Comics. Aiden is another co-owner of Volition Comics. I look forward to having Charlotte and Mark on. They're also co-owners of Volition Comics. Sophie, she's our social media manager. A number of other artists that we're working with, like Gabri and Alice and Bella and Rena and Michael and Grace. Just fill in the blank, whatever. Whoever. I look forward to having them all on. Obviously, a lot of you that are going to be hopping on and listening are fans that we already have, or subscribers that we already have, or people that are already interested, people who are already aware of who we are. But for those who don't know who we are, for those of you that are tuning in for the first time that have never heard about us, maybe you saw a post of ours in your Facebook feed, in your Instagram feed, in your YouTube feed, wherever you are, or maybe someone told you about us and you're here to check out more about who we are. Volition Comics is an up-and-coming publishing cooperative. In fact, cooperative is part of our business name, our official legal business name. Volition Comics Cooperative LLC. Of course, LLC being a limited liability company. We're based in Texas, in Austin, Texas. The idea of Volition Comics, obviously being a cooperative, the idea is, hey, we're all in this together. There is no one singular person, a small group of people at the top taking all the profit, right? Because that's how most companies operate in this capitalistic economy that we have. That's how most publishers operate, right? As far as in the publishing industry, in the writing industry, in anything that's creative, right? That goes for movie studios too, etc., right? What we are is creator-oriented, creator-based. Power flows up as opposed to down. In other words, what is very integral to our business model, and this is something that I stress as far as my philosophy on economics and politics that really influence how I want to set up this business, because I'm not a natural businessman, right? So I brought in my perspective of, hey, profit is not the objective. Because if it had been me from the get-go saying, hey, like it or not, I'm going to be the sole owner here, and this is my company, you guys work for me, right? In that scenario, everyone else would have been doing all the work, right? And I would have just taken their labor from them. I would have just, sold their art or their writing, right? And, I would have cut them the deal. It's a really bad deal, but I would have made them the same terrible deal that most other publishers made. As far as, hey, we're going to sell your product. We're going to distribute your product. We're going to sell your product. But, you only get so much percent. We take the rest of it, right? We profit off of that. Like a board of directors or owners. We profit off of that, right? But Volition Comics operates differently because you reap what you sow. You reap the fruits of your own labor. So if you are the creator of a property, of a franchise, of a story, of characters, of a world, right? It's yours, right? So you have the final say. What happens with it? You have the final say as far as the creative vision, where that goes. That's part of our contract that we whipped up. recently, as far as the agreement that we have internally, as far as how we approach each other and how we navigate this space together as a cooperative, right? Because we cooperate, we collaborate, right? But ultimately, we still have rights to our own ideas and our own work. So not only if you're a writer do you have the freedom to a final edit, right? Because most big publishers would force you to edit your stuff according to how they want it to be, so they can sell as much as they want. But if you as an author don't want to compromise, you do not have to compromise. You can have it formatted however you want. Basically, you can have it edited in any style, whatever you want, right? So you have that freedom. And then when it gets to selling it, distributing it, the company only takes a tiny, I cannot stress how many tinies in that sentence, only takes a tiny percentage. Why? Because at that point, it's not profit, and we make this very clear. This is not profit. What this is just simply, hey, we got to pay legal expenses. We got to pay our artists. We have to pay for our website. We have to pay for our marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So at that point, it's not profit. It's just literally business expenses. So anything that we retain is simply for that purpose. But like 70%, 80%, 90%, a really massive percentage, the vast majority of it, depending on what the project is, if it's a graphic novel, if it's a novel, if you're the sole writer, if there are multiple writers, if there are multiple artists involved, right? If it's simply cover art, or if it's panels, right? That's all calculated a little bit differently. But the principle that's so important is, hey, this is not profit-oriented. This is creator-oriented. By the same token, I talked about a second ago how the writer, the creator of a project, has final say, right, on the creative aspect of that project. That's true. The company cannot publish anything without the writer's say-so. Cannot force edits without the writer's say-so. By the same token, if an artist comes on board, isn't happy with their work, the company can't post their work without their permission, right? So the company is collaborative, it is cooperative, right? But at the same time, I made sure to have safeguards in there that we don't become like these other publishing houses, right? These other publishing companies. How basically you have people that are disconnected, or if they are connected, but are not the progenitors of a project, right? And ultimately don't have a right to dictate where it goes. So, certain things are collaborative, where we do take a democratic vote, like for instance, things on the website, how that's designed, social media, the legal and financial aspects of the company, right? But as far as the creative aspect, no. It's all creator-oriented. So that's who we are, right? But I know I ramble a little bit too long about our business model, but okay. Who are we really? Who are we really? What do we publish? What are our stories? Who are our characters? I wish I had Aiden on. I'm going to have him on here soon. The first property that we ever published was his. He is the writer and the artist for Kwai Zombie, which we do have the first volume of that out on Webtoons, and he's working on the second volume, I believe, although it's kind of taken a back seat because the main thing that we've been cooking up these past 4 years, well, cooking up collaboratively anyway, because actually the first prototype started back in 2016, is The Keepers. Now, I was 16 at the time. I was born in 2000, so The Keepers. The idea of The Keepers is, hey, listen, if the world is in danger, shouldn't its heroes be from all over the world, right? Because the Avengers, think about it, really. Really think about it. Go down the list of all these characters. Most of them are American. And not just American, but in the case of the Avengers, most of them are from New York City. Spider-Man, New York City. Iron Man, New York City. The Fantastic Four are headquartered in, you guessed it, New York City. Did I mention Captain America? New York City, right? The world is, listen, it's a major city. I get it. It's a major city. But it's so America-centric is what it is. It's not the full breadth of who and what humanity really is. Now, yes, you have characters from other continents, other countries, etc. But that's an afterthought, really. That's not what was part of the original design of the Avengers. Now, the Justice League, I guess, I mean, it's not as bad as far as it all being one city, but it's still the same point. Most of them are Americans. Now, yes, you got Superman, he's from Krypton, yeah, but he is functionally American. I mean, yes, his slogan used to be truth, justice, and the American way. Now they've changed that a little bit. He has a more global outlook. Yes, he's a hero for everybody, but yes, he was born and raised in, well, not born, excuse me, but raised in America, right? You got Batman, America. Green Lantern, Flash, America. Now, Wonder Woman, okay, Themyscira, but she still oftentimes functions in America. You got Aquaman, yes, Atlantis, but oftentimes he still functions in America, operates in America. Now you have other characters, yes, they're from elsewhere, but come on, you get the idea. I'll have to paint you a full picture, you get the idea. But the idea is, hey, the world's in danger. Like, really, if the whole world is in danger, and if you're going to have a world where superpowers are a thing, it wouldn't all be in one country, let alone one city. That wouldn't happen. So, we have Wingspan from Canada. We have Shylock from Kenya. We have Cosmo from Cambodia. We have Glaze from Bolivia. We have Blaze from the Netherlands. And Glaze sorry, not Glaze, I already mentioned her. Meant to say Ambassador from New Zealand. That's our original 6. Now, obviously, that's Volume 1 by Volume 2 and 3 and beyond. It goes way further than that, that's 6 countries right there. It goes to like 12, 15, 20, 25. It just expands rapidly because as the stakes grow bigger and the risks grow bigger, come on, it's the whole world. Think about it, seriously. It's not rocket science. In any case, The Keepers started out as an anthology of short stories that I published in 2018 by myself. I self-published in 2018 by myself. It didn't go anywhere, and that's fine. Completely fine, because honestly, it wasn't the best that it could have been. You had seeds for greatness, but it wasn't the best that it absolutely could have been. Now, that project lay dormant for a number of years. Then I met Aiden through some mutual friends and a job that we worked together at the time back in, we met in 2020, but by 2021, we had a conversation at a coffee shop on that fateful day, and I just happened to mention, I forgot how it came up, but I mentioned that I wrote. Now, he mentioned that he's an artist, has worked on a comic book, has one virtually complete. That's Zombie, as I mentioned. And he took one look at my characters, took one look at the books I had at the time, and was like, dude, we have to adapt this. We have to adapt this. Alas, I let him adapt it. Most of the characters he stayed pretty true to. Wingspan barely changed. Barely. Blaze, yes, some updates, but more or less the same. Shylock, more or less the same. Ambassador, more or less the same. Glaze, more or less the same. Now, Cosmo, he really just ran with it. But you know what? I'm so glad because at the time, for whatever reason, I had a thing for spandex. Now, get this. A monk from Cambodia. Three things that made no sense about that. Or at least the way that I portrayed that. Had a full head of hair, number 1. Number 2, wore spandex and a cape. And number 3, had a wife. I'm going to say that one more time. a Buddhist monk from Cambodia with a full head of hair, a wife, and wearing Spandex and a cape. Come on. So he completely changed that, but for the better, because it actually made the character more organic, more faithful to the culture and towards the actual core of what I professed him to be, right? But, at the time, like I said, initially the Keepers didn't take off because it was not the best it could be. Now, most of the characters did stay mostly intact, not just their design, but also their stories. As far as Cosmo, just had to completely rewrite Cosmo. His first origin story was truly hot garbage. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. So I rewrote his origin completely, and it's the shortest story of the first volume. But tell you what, I would say personally, it's second best only to the original Wingspan origin story. But in any case, that was summer, fall 21. On our Facebook page at the time, put out an ad for some writers, and actually, funnily enough, 2 hopped on board in a matter of 24 hours. 2 hopped on board in a matter of 24 hours. Now, one of them was in another state, and then another one wound up being a co-owner, practically down the street. Well, okay, not down the street, but like half an hour away. A really reasonable distance. Mark, he would wind up doing the cover art for Cosmo and Shadelock. And it wasn't too long after that, it was maybe another year and a half, where Charlotte came on board. And she wound up doing the cover art for Ambassador, and would ultimately digitize the cover art that Aiden did for the Keepers Volume 1, front cover art for Keepers Volume 1. She wound up being a co-owner as well. So right now it's the 4 of us, me, Aiden, Mark, Charlotte, the 4 of us as co-owners. But the key thing to keep in mind is, as a cooperative, the door is always open. Is always open for co-ownership, for new blood to come in. So we have our core group of co-owners, we have freelancers, and then once you put in a certain amount of work over a certain amount of time, the door is open to you to be a co-owner as well. So anyway, that is some background on Volition Comics, and to be fair, that's an oversimplification too, because there are some things too that go back way further. I mentioned Quai-Zombie. Obviously, I think Aiden started that. I don't want to misquote him. He can hop on next time and correct me if I'm wrong. I think he started it when he was 18, 19, something like that. Maybe I'm probably off by a year or two. It might have been like 17. I'm not entirely sure. But in any case, he started that back then. I started the first Keepers prototype in 2016. So I was 16. Now I do have a project. I'll share more on that a little bit later. But actually, I started that one when I was 11, which a lot has changed since the first iteration of that project. But actually, in a lot of ways, it stayed very true to what I was trying to do at the time. In a lot of the characters, yes, I upgraded and I gave proper backstories and fleshed out and whatnot. But as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. All right, so that's some background on Volition Comics and how we. Well, actually, hold on a second. There's still a few more things to share. Okay, so as you can tell, this is the first time I've ever done the podcast. Obviously, I'm doing this off script, so bear with me. I'm at 19 and a half minutes. I guess we'll see how long this winds up being. Not that I'm in any rush. I'm not trying to crunch time or anything, so I'm just going to talk until I can't talk anymore. But in any case, okay, so obviously Aiden and I started working on the comic adaptation in 2021, 2022. End of 2022 is when Charlotte came on board. it was fall of 2023 that we published Volume 1 of The Keepers. I was living out of state at the time. Came back. Aiden and I became roommates. And, for a while, he was really exerting himself doing comic work. I really wasn't doing much of anything. I was burned out. I was working hard, just trying to make ends meet, right? But then my lovely fiancée, granted, we weren't engaged at the time, still dating, but I credit a lot of where we are now to her, because she practically forced me to sit down and write. She forced me to sit down and write something, because it had been years since I've written anything. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I got my mojo. I don't know if I got my juice. I can't do it. But she forced me. And guess what? I sat down and I did something. It wasn't lightning in the bottle immediately. But see, that's the thing about writing. That's the thing about creating. In any medium, I imagine. It's probably the same in music, right? It's probably the same in sculpting, for instance, right? Or architecture, or fill in the blank, whatever, right? You're not immediately going to be inspired. But you have to get those juices flowing, right? And oftentimes it's a matter of just do something. Write something. Right? You have to get in the zone. The zone doesn't find you, you find the zone. Well, actually, like you write, and then ultimately the zone finds you. Right? So, since then, I haven't looked back, to be honest. That was very early this year. It was like the first few days of January. I haven't looked back since. And she pushed us to incorporate and to not release anything further until we finally incorporate. It's been on our radar for a number of years. Like, hey guys, we got to really incorporate here. We really got to make this company official here. But we've been dragging our feet. Well, finally, as of April 13th this year, we are incorporated as an LLC in the state of Texas. And obviously, we are really ramping up things now. Aiden got his tablet. He's really producing more than he ever has in digital work. We just re-released Volume 1 with that new cover art of Charlotte's that I mentioned earlier. We re-released that as an ebook. And we're working on getting a new physical edition out for that as well. I have a number of projects down the pipeline in various stages of development that I will share a little bit later on. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically our background, how we came to be, our business model, who we are. Right? Now, who am I? I saved that for last. Because at first I was thinking, what if I introduce myself first and then go into the company, right? But since we got that out of the way, let me kind of share a little bit more about myself and who I am, where I come from, my experience in life, and then the next few episodes, whenever I have Aiden on and Sophie, etc., they will have the floor as well to share more about themselves. Because I want you guys to have the opportunity to get to know the creators behind Volition Comics. And I want the creators of Volition Comics, co-owners and freelancers alike, to have an opportunity to share who they are, to make sure that their stories are being told, that their stories are being heard. In any case, I was born and raised in Germany. You probably can't tell with my accent, but I was born and raised in Germany. Now, oftentimes when I tell people that, they assume, or they ask, the first question is asked, okay, so your parents were military, right? And I say, yeah, but that's an oversimplification. Because a lot of people have, a lot of people, by luck, are born in another country because their parents were military, right? Because they just happened to be stationed there, they were born there, lived there for a few years, and moved back to the States or whatever. So it's just happenstance, right? In my case, it's not happenstance. Long story short, my mom full-blooded German, right? That entire side of the family, full-blooded German. Well, and Czech and Polish too, but that goes a little bit further. That's a whole another conversation we can have about my genealogy, but I do have some Slavic background as well. That's where my middle name, Drozd, comes from. It used to be my surname. Now it's my middle name. My mom, prior to me being born, years before I was born, she joined the U.S. Army and switched her citizenship from German to American. And yeah, I've moved around a lot, and I'm debating how much detail to go into as far as the exact timeline. But point being, I was a military brat, so I have that experience, but I also have the experience of a German whose native language is German, whose family is German. I lived with my grandparents for a number of years and went to German public school. In fact, those were some of the best years of my life. 07 to 09 in Konstanz, which is in the very south of the country. It's by Lake Constance, its namesake. It's a lake shared by Germany, Switzerland, Austria. And beautiful area, picturesque, magical. It's like a fairy tale. I mean, but I probably romanticize it because I grew up there. That's what I consider to be home. But listen, I mean, it shapes you when, as a kid, you can just bike or walk to another country. Just hop across the border real quick in less than half an hour, like 20 minutes, depending on your mode of transportation. And you got buses and you got trains, etc., etc. You don't need a car over there. You do not need a car over there, right? So to come to America with that experience, that background, it was cultural whiplash, I'm not going to lie to you, because a lot of those things are lacking here. But, that's another conversation for later. I love to travel. I've been to 27 countries. Some of my favorite countries I've been to so far include Ghana for 2 months. I was there in a volunteer program. That's a whole saga. I make a whole podcast just about that, how I got malaria. I went to Togo. How I was constipated for 2 weeks, TMI, etc., etc. That's a whole story. How I went to Korea for a conference for a week. That was in 2023. The Ghana thing was in 2019. Egypt, I was 10. Mexico a couple of times. Canada, Jamaica. Actually, tell you what, the last time I went to Germany, it was my Oma, which means grandma in German. It was my Oma's 80th birthday. Instead of flying directly there, and by the way, I met my whole family over there, people that I hadn't seen in many years. Instead of flying directly into Germany and meeting up with my family, I decided, hey, let's fly into Norway and work my way down by bus. So I flew into Norway, spent a couple nights there. Lovely country. Spent some time in Oslo, the capital. Took the bus down to Gothenburg, Sweden, spent a night there. Then took the bus down again to Copenhagen, Denmark, spent 2 nights there. Lovely city. I absolutely loved Copenhagen. One of my favorite cities I've ever been to, which immediately made Denmark just shoot up the ranking of one of my favorite countries I've ever been to. Then to Flensburg, Germany, which is the northernmost city of my home country, which I've never been that far north of my home country. Then Hamburg, or Hamburg, the American/English pronunciation, but Hamburg. Spent 2 nights there. Awesome city. Then Würzburg, which is where we had the birthday party, and then finally Konstanz. And then a little footnote in Switzerland. But hey, I mean, I barely count Switzerland as a foreign country because it's practically my backyard growing up. So I love to travel. I'm into politics, into activism. I study political science, actually, at Southern New Hampshire University. Wow, that's so Ivy League, I know, right? That's such a prestigious college. But hey, I mean, their online program made sense at the time, so that's what I went for. So yeah, I'm a bachelor's in political science. That YouTube I mentioned earlier is about politics. I haven't uploaded there in a while. I need to, but hey, that's up to you guys if you want to hop in there and kind of see what I'm talking about. But otherwise, I'm going to try to keep the two separate, so I'm not going to get into that as far as where I stand. That's something we can touch on another time, or, that's something that you can explore on your own. But yes, politics, I absolutely care a great deal about the state of our country, the state of our world. I always have. I'm very opinionated when it comes to all these different crises and issues that we're dealing with. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm finding my way back to my faith. It's been a journey these past few years. I've spent some time in the Anglican tradition. My fiance is a United Methodist. I have a keen interest in Orthodoxy as well. But at the end of the day, down to my bones, I'm Roman Catholic. Let's see. I love cats. I've had cats for the past, 10 years at this point. Well, actually, a little bit longer if you want to not count the intermissions. But I love cats. Better than dogs. Okay, time to have a debate in the comment section. Let's go. But other than that, I love funk and disco music. I'm kind of an old soul when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's funny actually. I'm gonna mention my fiance one more time just to illustrate how we really are opposites, and it kind of illustrates kind of who I am a little bit too. Obviously, Catholic versus Protestant, right? Android. I'm Team Android versus iPhone. Can't stand iPhone. Honestly, I can't stand any Apple product, to be honest with you. But by the same token, I use Windows. She uses Mac. So that just kind of goes to show who I am, my outlook on things. Actually, on top of that, also, I wore a suit and tie every day in high school. I lost count. 150 ties, 160 ties, something like that. I always lose count every time I try, so I just give up at a certain point. But yeah, I wore a suit and tie every day in high school, and yeah. Let's see what else I could possibly share. But no, that really gives you an indication of who I am, the kind of perspective that I bring to my characters and to Volition Comics. And yeah. I hope that I haven't rambled too much, but hey, that's, I guess, kind of the point of the podcast, right? Especially if it's not scripted. But yeah, these next few weeks, months, I imagine we'll start with a monologue, then have a guest on, depending on the week and the topic we want to talk about or who's available to talk to me. I also want to record the first volume of The Keepers as an audiobook, and once I do that, I'll let you guys know. And I plan to do a commentary track on that. That's going to be part of this podcast. And I'd like to invite Aiden on and whoever else wants to share their thoughts as well to do that. But otherwise, thank you for spending the past half an hour with me. And I'll see you guys next week.